Hello, and thanks for taking part in the Wrexham.com General Election 29 Q&A video.
No problem.
Dive straight in. Are you able to tell us a little about yourself, any political history, and why you have the political leanings that you do?
Sure. So I'm Mary Wimbury. I'm the Labour and Co-op candidate for Wrexham. Currently work in social care, trying to improve services in care homes and for people receiving care at home. Immediately prior to that, I ran a UK-wide charity doing maths enrichment in secondary schools, so running competitions, summer schools, that kind of thing. And back in the 90s, I ran a successful parliamentary campaign to keep key sporting events like the FA Cup final, then Five Nations rugby on free-to-air television for everybody to enjoy. So I've got a bit of experience of getting things done in Parliament. I've also been a member of the Labour Party since I was a teenager in the Thatcher years, and I saw what she did, what her government did to people, including members of my own family who had disability benefits unfairly cut. I saw people denied opportunities, and that's really what motivates me. And everything I've done, I've always wanted to try and, it sounds a bit naff, but make the world a better place effectively. And you know, that's why I'm standing to be Wrexham's next MP, and that's what I'd want to do. I'm married with 3 children. My husband's a Welsh speaker, so dwi wedi dysgu Cymraeg. I've learnt. I wouldn't say I'm perfect, but I did manage to win the Prose Trophy at the Learners Eisteddfod in Llanrwst last year. And yeah, my two of my children are students, and the other ones now living and working in Greater Manchester.
The locality of candidates is one debate we've spotted. Do you think it's important that people are represented by those who live and work in their communities?
I do. Currently, I live in Colwyn Bay, but I work for an organisation based in Wrexham, so I know the area well. But if I'm elected, I'll be moving here because I think you have to be part of the community that you're seeking to represent. But I also think most people are more interested in what you're going to do than where you've come from.
That was going to be one of the questions, that if you win, would you move to Wrexham? And also, if you don't, would you move anyway?
Well, at the moment, my youngest finished school last year, so I'm in a position where I can move. I obviously have got a work base here as well. So, I mean, it's all happened very fast, to be honest. I applied to be the candidate probably less than a month ago, and at the time I was thinking spring general election, think about moving between now and then effectively, and then it's all just been a complete whirlwind. But no, you know, definitely my intention is to move over here. You've
stood for MP, AM elsewhere, I think MEP as well in North Wales. Do you want to represent Wrexham, or are you looking to be elected?
I want to, look, I'm standing here because what I believe in and because I want to represent Wrexham. I stood previously in another constituency, but I think I've then stood as a regional list candidate for North Wales and then as a MEP candidate for the whole of Wales. And I chose to apply to stand in Wrexham. I haven't applied for any other selections in this round because I felt like it was a good fit in terms of, you know, an area that I worked in and knew and would like to represent.
You've mentioned obviously the direction where you live and the nearby constituency, presuming that's Aberconwy. The incumbents is very similar to Wrexham in a way. It's the incumbents stood down after winning several in a row. Why did you not fancy that as opposed to Wrexham?
I suppose I stood in Aberconwy back in 2015. It's a very different situation, I suppose, in terms of the in terms of the sort of makeup of the constituency and whatever. And so, really, I know Wrexham well. It's, you know, it's a mixed area, and it's an area that needs a lot doing for it, and I could really see gaps there, both in terms of I think the role of the MP is not to sort out everything locally, but you can use your position to bring people together and try and achieve things. And I think, you know, in terms of the town centre, in terms of the poverty in Wrexham, in terms of homelessness, I've got ideas that I'd like to build on and represent Wrexham. So it just felt like a really good fit.
Ian Lucas, speaking of incumbents, Ian Lucas nominated you, I think.
He did.
And is supporting you,
yeah.
Unsurprisingly. How are you different from him, or is it more of the same? And I suppose if it is different, What's new?
Okay, so I think Ian's worked incredibly hard for Wrexham and achieved an enormous amount, and I'd want to build on that. But equally, you do things in your own way. I suppose the obvious differences are I'd be the first woman MP for Wrexham. We've never had one before. I'd also be the first ever Labour and Co-operative MP for North Wales, and the co-op part of my politics is quite important to me as well. And that's very much about bringing people together and ensuring people have control over what's happening to them, and sort of, power and wealth is shared around our community effectively. So that's, very much a principle that I'd want to bring in. And I suppose, I'm a different person from Ian. While I think he's done an enormous amount of work, I'd be wanting to build on that, but I'd do it in my own way and bring my own experiences in as well.
You've mentioned you're a long-term member of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
I've noticed somewhere that mentioned your Twitter bio at one point said, still a member, just. Was that referring to membership of the Labour Party? And if so, can you explain what that was? And do you still recognise the Labour Party you're part of?
I do. I think, as I say, I've been a member of the Labour Party all my adult life. And it is very much, my politics is very much built on that, bringing people together, recognising that we achieve more together than we do alone, for the many, not the few, which has been a slogan sort of from the Blair years to the Corbyn years. And for me, it's very much about recognising community, how we can work together. And society is more than the sum of individuals, and that's very much where my politics comes from, and I think that's where the Labour Party's come from throughout its history.
We've got a range of female candidates in Wrexham.
Of course.
Today, it seems that the tone of the debate and politics has become quite toxic, and we've seen that change on social media as well, particularly towards female MPs. Why do you want to be an MP in that environment? And I suppose if elected, what would you do to try and fight to change that tone? Okay.
Why do I want to be an MP? I wouldn't say I particularly chose to be an MP in that environment, but that's the environment we've got. But for me, it's even more important in some ways to stand up for what you believe in and not be put off by some of the toxicity in politics. I think everyone who's standing for whatever party, we all have a responsibility to try and do the best we can to move forward in a way that allows us to disagree without being disagreeable effectively. And so, we all have, I'm sure we all, occasionally lose our temper or whatever, but we all have to try and do our best to model the type of behaviour we'd like to see right across the political spectrum.
If you're representing Wrexham at Prime Minister Questions today, what question would you ask the Prime Minister, and what would you hope to uncover by asking it?
That's an interesting one. I think if I'd been at Prime Minister's Questions today, I think it would probably have to be about homelessness, because I think it's a particular issue in Wrexham, obviously. We've had the highest number of homeless deaths in Wales in the past year, but also it is a national issue, and it's an issue that I think flows very directly from Conservative austerity policies, and I'd want to pin the Prime Minister down on that and get him to take some responsibility.
This is the third election in 4 years. People say they're fed up with politics, party politics, politicians. You're all the same.
Yeah.
You never listen anyway. What would be different about you?
Firstly, I do listen. I always try and listen and be constructive as well. I think, for me, politics is you've got to have ideals. You've got to have a vision of the sort of society you want to see. But then you've got to have very practical solutions about how you get there, and also recognise that no one has all the answers. You've got ideas, you put them out there, you listen to them, you hear the criticisms, and then you revise them, and then you come up with things that will work even better. And I think it is that, living it and demonstrating it in terms of what you do is all you can do. And, I've obviously been knocking on doors around Wrexham, asking people to vote for me. And, all I can say in terms of a promise to them is, I really mean it when I say I want to stand up for Wrexham. I want to get things done here. I want to make positive changes. And, if I'm elected and then I'm coming back and asking for your vote again, that's the way to hold me accountable, but equally I'd want to be accountable between elections as well, meeting people, discussing issues and revising policies and actually trying to make practical changes that work.
Not taking a specific party manifesto item, as hopefully they can take care of that themselves, but as an MP you might get a chance to bring in a new law via private members bill. If you had that opportunity, what law would you seek to bring in?
What law would I bring in? I think it would be something around, I think we've had Ian's obviously done a lot of work on the sort of fast changing issues around technology and how it interacts with politics. I think there's also an issue in terms of actually commerce as well, and we're potentially creating new monopolies in many areas that, while in the short term they might be able to kind of offer us the lowest prices, but then going onwards, once they've kind of knocked all the competition out of the market, I think there are real potential dangers there. So it would be something around, I think it's one of the things that the US has been much better about actually, is curbing monopoly power in commerce, and I think that's something we need to look at, particularly in the online world.
You say on your website that I know Wrexham and its issues and opportunities and would seek to build on the work Ian has done on employment opportunities, transport and community building. What do you see as the key issues locally and opportunities for Wrexham, and specifically what would you do to either solve them or enhance them?
So, I think the biggest issue that affects everyone is the state of the town centre at the moment. And what I'd say is, I think, we've had a Tory government in Westminster that hasn't given enough money to Wales and thus to Wrexham. But I also don't think the Tory Independent Local Authority has spent the money it has in the wisest ways. And I think it's about having a clear, overarching strategy for the town centre that includes tackling issues around homelessness and drug use, which most people I speak to feel quite compassionate that people are suffering in that way, but equally it puts them off coming into the town centre. We've also got issues around transport. Parking is a big issue. People are going to choose to go to out of town areas if they've got free parking there and not in the town centre. Equally, we've got issues around bus cuts, which means particularly older people and younger people can find it difficult to get into the town centre, and we've got into this downward spiral with increasing empty shops. I think we need to reverse that effectively, and it is about having an overarching strategy for all those things that gets us on the up again. And then the more you've got shops being taken up, the more you've got people coming in, the more you've got people able to come into work, earning money that they can spend in the shops, and we need to get into that virtuous cycle.
There's been lots of talk over the last 3 years since the referendum about Scotland, Northern Ireland and England in their own right, but how will you make the Welsh voice stronger in Parliament?
I think it's by being there and speaking up for Wales effectively, and I find it quite frustrating when we have UK-wide news programmes that are talking about something nice, new and innovative that's happening in England, and actually it's something we've already been doing in Wales, for example, or something we do very differently in Wales. And I don't think the UK media has caught up sufficiently with devolution to be able to talk about that. But for me personally, I think there are a lot of positive examples of things that we do in Wales. I was tweeting the other day complaining about the Today programme not reflecting student finance in Wales, for example, where I think we have a much better arrangement than in England. But also we've kept education maintenance allowance under the Welsh Labour government. And there, I think it is about making sure when there are debates about those things, even if they're in an English context, you're intervening and saying what's happening in Wales and making sure that other people across the UK have that understanding of what we're doing here.
Speaking of devolution, the NHS itself is a cornerstone talking point policy, all parties, all politicians, and obviously in Wales health is devolved. Policy and spending comes from Welsh Labour, and locally the health board is in special measures. And that essentially kind of top level intervention really from Welsh Government. You could argue therefore Welsh Labour, so the fingerprints on that is pretty Welsh Labour. Do you see what's going on in the local health system as a shining example of what Labour can do for the NHS?
I think we've got problems in the NHS in North Wales in particular. I would say that I think while direct spending decisions are made by the Welsh Labour government, actually the overall envelope of money they've got comes from Westminster, and there hasn't been enough coming to Wales. I think there are starting to be shoots of recovery. I was talking to the people in the community collaborative running the new GP service in Wrexham last week or the week before. I'm kind of slightly losing track. But I think that's, following on from the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, looking at whole people, looking at outcomes. I think they've got a really innovative service there where they've got lots of different health professionals under the same roof. Actually, they've got care navigators who are seeing people initially, and then it's like, they were telling me about someone who's come in with a particular ailment to a particular part of their body, but actually they had other mental health issues, depression issues, rather than saying, oh, we'll refer you, we'll send you a letter, you'll get another appointment somewhere else in 6 weeks. It was, can you wait now? We've got someone down the corridor who can see you. And I think those sort of interventions are exactly the things that are starting to happen in Wales that we need to build on. And I think that works better for the individual in terms of getting their needs met, but also it takes pressure off the off A&E as well. And hopefully, we can get to the point where going to A&E at the miler is something you only need to do when you really need to do it, and actually you can then be seen quickly and dealt with appropriately.
Back in March, I believe one of your social media posts mentioned, for any of the people who've asked me if anti-Semitism is really a problem in the Labour Party, check out this thread compiled from pro-Jeremy Corbyn groups on Facebook, and the images linked to show a series of anti-Semitic comments and the use of the word traitor as well. Do you think the party's done enough to tackle the problem in the Labour Party? No,
I don't. I think, anti-Semitism has become a problem in the Labour Party, and I don't think the National Party has done enough to stamp it out.
What would you like to see done differently or to progress that?
So I think we need to take action more quickly and speedily. I think it doesn't do anyone any good if complaints are made and people are left hanging on, whether they turn out to be innocent or guilty for far too long. But equally, I think there has been a lack of leadership on the issue, and I think there has been a lack of commitment to making clear what isn't acceptable. I think it is perfectly legitimate, for example, to have a debate about the actions of the Israeli government. What is not legitimate is to be using anti-Semitic tropes and continually doing so and remaining a member of the Labour Party.
Nationalisation of Royal Mail, rail operating companies, energy supply networks, possibly water, sewerage, and recently the Openreach part of BT for broadband being mooted. Early this month, I think the CBI said such nationalisation could cost around £200 billion. What would you like to see nationalised and why? And also, what is the nationalisation of companies and services for the UK benefit, but not Wales? How does that sit with you?
So I think there's a number of issues to unpick there effectively. And firstly, I'd like to come back to the fact that I'm standing as a Labour and Co-op candidate. So one of the things I'd like to look at is not old style nationalisations, but actually, can we look at if there are public services that we need to make changes in ownership to make them deliver better, and that's a priority, then what we should be looking at is what are the ownership models we could use. So things like the post office, for example, we all use and we all need. Is there a way of sort of looking at looking at creating a kind of co-op across the UK? In terms of, I think you mentioned, does it benefit the UK rather than Wales? Well, we've got Dŵr Cymru as Welsh Water is a good example of something that is in social ownership that actually has been done to benefit Wales. And again, I think, these are big structural changes. There's going to have to be significant debate around them. And I think one of the aspects we can look at is, if we're nationalising things or if we're co-operatising things or taking them into social ownership, should that be done on a UK basis or should it be done on a Welsh basis, English basis, Scottish basis, etc., Northern Irish basis?
The outcome of the election could be a coalition.
Yep.
And obviously all candidates say they're focused on outright wins, but let's put that to the side to force a direct answer. What would be your most comfortable coalition?
I mean, I think in the end, it's got to come down to policies, and it's got to come down to what sort of joint agenda you can agree about the direction of the country. For me, we've had the Tories in various forms in government for 9 years. We've seen terrible austerity and the effects that that's had on people, here in Wrexham and across the United Kingdom. And it's got to be, for me, moving forward, a government that actually tackles that and tackles the problems that that's created, and that would be my priority.
How did you vote in the referendum?
I voted to remain.
And have you changed your position since?
No. Straight after the referendum, I voted to remain because I thought it was the best option for the country. Straight afterwards, I thought, OK, we've lost. Maybe they have got some solutions I haven't thought of. We need to give, the Leave side a chance to come through with something and, see what the proposals are. Frankly, we've had 3.5 years of chaos and people who supported Leave not being able to agree amongst themselves about how to progress it. And I do think we've reached a point where the only option is to put a deal, whichever deal that turns out to be, back to people and say, is this what you wanted? And it's not down to MPs to decide. It's everybody going back to everybody having an equal vote and making that and confirming what the decision is.
You mentioned Labour policy that's offer a vote, and it says that this time the choice will be between leaving with a sensible deal or to remain in the EU.
Yeah.
And then Labour will carry out whatever the people decide. Surely the people did decide in the, as it was branded at the time, once in a generation vote, and we're having a general election again, which is Brexit's a big topic on it. Yeah. Surely this is doubly undemocratic.
Well, we had a vote of people, and then the Leave side won. The Prime Minister who'd created the referendum then left the scene with no clear map about what should happen. We've had 2 Prime Ministers, we've had another general election after that vote, and we've had Parliament unable to agree on a deal. I don't think it's an ideal situation at all, but given that it hasn't been possible to agree within a parliament that was elected after the referendum on how to leave, I think the only option is to put an option of how to leave in front of people, say, this is very clear, you can either choose that option again or you can choose to stay.
Jeremy Corbyn appears not to be committing to whether he'd campaign to leave or remain in second referendum. Do you think that's an attempt to appeal to the masses without actually making a commitment? And do you think it's important that people know what leaders think?
I do think it's important that people know what leaders think. Equally, I can understand that this has been an incredibly divisive issue. We've all got to make our own decisions to an extent within party policy about what we say about it. I think I've been very clear. I think it needs to go back to people. Personally, in 2016, I supported Remain. Nothing that's happened in the past 3.5 years has changed my mind fundamentally on that, but I don't think, even if I'm an MP, it should be my vote that decides it. I think the situation we're in, the only option is to go back to people and let them decide, with each of us having an equal vote.
Have you got anything else to add for potential voters watching this?
I suppose what I'd say is I think I have to work and earn your trust and not taking any votes for granted. But I would also say to people, I think, look at the result last time. I am the only candidate that can stop the Tories taking Wrexham and potentially giving them a majority in the country to do even more damage. And I would really appreciate it if on that basis you were able to support me.